I've had a number of requests to go into more detail about the types of wire traces I'm using and the types of rigs I'm using. So I'm going to start off with the basic wire trace. Now, a lot of my fishing is done with big mackerel tails, and the rig for that is fairly simple. It's just two number 6 trebles, 30-pound wire which terminates in a size 8 swivel, and for the mackerel rig the only weight that's actually on the line is going to be 3 or 4 SSGs crimped onto the trace. Bearing in mind that the mackerel when frozen is between 4 and 5 ounces, so there's quite a bit of casting weight. For the mackerel I'm using trace which is about 24 inches long. If I'm paternostering or float trolling, then I make them a bit shorter, about 18 inches, but generally speaking I like them around 24 inches. So for the basic rig, I'm going to use this marker braid, so it's maybe a bit easier for you to see. Form not a tight loop, but just a loop on the end of the wire trace. That'll go through the treble. Open up the loop a bit, put the treble through the loop, put it down. You need to make sure that the wire is pulled back over itself, and if you pull that up, it more or less just locks it enough. But I tend to, I'll twist that, and some people will use twiddling sticks. I attach forceps and spin it. Some people anneal the wire to make it softer and easier to do it. I find this stuff quite easy enough, so I'm just twist it for 15-20 mil. And that's basically it. Now if that, obviously that's wire, it won't come undone again. This is coming undone. But, and then I'll just trim that off. Put the tag away. So that's more or less that. Now the second treble. Thread that on to the main line. Now I leave a gap because I'm using quite large chunks of mackerel, 2 to 3 inches. Now we'll just lay that across the 2 trebles like that. Bring the wire trace round and then just pull it up tight on there. So that's actually locking the bottom half of that trace in place, and then 4-5 turns round the shank of the trebles, and then back through the eye. Pull it up tight, and that's more or less it. At the other end, say depending on what I'm using the trace for, if it's mackerel it's about 24 inches, if it's paternoster it's about 18 inches. Again, form a loop, push it through the swivel, put the swivel through, and again make sure that this part is pulled back on itself. That'll help lock it. I twist it again, and this time if it's going to be for the mackerel rig where I'm putting shot on the rig, I'll twist that for 30-40 mil in length. So when I'm actually putting the shot on, I'm putting the shot on the twisted part, not just the plain wire. I don't know, I think that's just a confidence thing, whether it makes any difference or not, I don't know. And then I just close that up, and I'd put 3 or 4 on, depending. This one's got 4, and if there's a lot of weed, then I'll only put 3 on. Bearing in mind that the frozen mackerel is about 4 to 5 ounces, so there's plenty of casting weight. And that's basically the simple wire traces that I use. As I said, I only use a couple of rigs. The main one I use is the mackerel one, which is 24-inch trace, a couple of size 6 heavy duty trebles on it, 3 or 4 SSG shot just to add a little bit of weight, and it's just tied to the main line, and I tend to put an anti-tangle sleeve over there just to try and stop the build-up of weed on the knot should there be a problem with it. So that's basically the simple mackerel rig. From there is the paternoster rig. Now again, it's just very similar, except this time I use a slightly smaller trace, 18 inches maybe. Heavy duty trebles again. Now to the top treble, because 90% of the time I'm using dead baits or part baits. Haven't done live baiting for too many years, but I tend to tie some 8 or 10 pound line to the top eye of the top treble. That can obviously be set to any particular depth you want it. I've cut it down short for this demo, but I mean, if you want to fish 2 foot off the bottom, 2 foot bit of, if you want to put 3 foot off the bottom, 3 foot bit. Terminating in a lead, obviously. I tend to use about 2 ounces, nothing too much. Top of the trace is attached to the main line. It's a buffer bead on it. Running on the main line, I tend to use sunken floats these days. I don't bother with putting surface floats on. It's far quicker, far easier. So I've got a small link swivel on there which the float is attached to, a little dumpy float that I've adapted to fish bottom end only. And used to use power gun back in the day, but I tend to use float stops now just to determine what particular depth you want it to. And that's basically it. The only alternative to that is one that I use if I'm using soft baits, as in sardines or indeed herring, and I'll show you that now. Now the herring rig is slightly different. I haven't got any herring, obviously. This is a bit of mackerel. But what I tend to do is I'll put a loop of 10 pound line through the tail, like that. So I pass one loop through the other loop, so it's just trapped on there. Now the only difference to the mackerel rig is there's a little fox plastic clip attached to the swivel end. Now I trap the hooks on in exactly the same way as I would normally, but because it's a soft bait, and if you hit it really hard on the cast you'll just rip the hooks out, put that onto that clip. So the weight of the bait, the weight of the fish, would be a sardine or a herring, is taken by this thin nylon line. And then you've just got a bow in the trace there, so there's no pressure being put on the hooks. It's all on the root of the tail. When it hits the water, 9 times out of 10, doesn't happen all the time, 9 times out of 10, that loop will come off and you're just fishing it in a normal manner. That's the only difference there is. That's my basic rigs. I keep it simple and it catches fish. Hope that's been of interest, and I hope it works for you. Freshly frozen mackerel is my favourite bait of all time. I add a little bit of buoyancy before freezing, which makes the bait act like a wafter. Before casting, I add a couple of extra slashes to help the juices flow. And then the final touch, a little spray of pixie dust to help them find the bait. That's better. How about that? £25 on the button.